Every night, Alex Rogan dreams of going far away.
You really are leaving here, aren't you?
Tonight, he will go further than he ever dreamed.
Welcome to Rylos, my boy.
He's 1 in a million.
Alert! We are under attack.
But the odds against him are 1,000,000 to 1. Alex Rogan is The Last Starfighter, rated PG. Starts Friday at select theaters. Check newspapers for locations.
Greetings, Starfighters, and welcome to Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. Today we are talking about the 1984 film The Last Starfighter. And my name is Steve Guntley, and who is here helping me take on the Kodan Armada with me?
Space Captain Justin reporting for duty.
Captain, good to see you. And who else is here with us?
Commander.
Oh,
Yeah, that's right. She's got the pips.
sir, yes, sir.
Oh my god, did you get a J-band? I should have finished saying my name. But did you guys watch Battlestar Galactica?
Yes.
No.
So much. It was so good. I want to make Ailish watch all of it, but we
I've
have so
been
many
told-
shows that we need to watch.
I've been told I would enjoy it and that I should watch it, but I
You
have not
would
watched
definitely enjoy the
Oh,
first
yeah.
couple of seasons and the last season.
For sure. Yeah, there's some squishy middles there. But I don't know. It's a show that never got really, truly terrible, except maybe
it didn't get truly terrible.
Fat
like
Suit
the,
Apollo was pretty
but
embarrassing.
I love fighting in space.
Oh, yeah.
And when I think the third season when they stopped fighting in space, I was like, where is my fighting in space?
Yeah, it's all this sitting around talking about, like, society and the
don't-
soul.
I don't need exposition.
I need laser
yeah.
blasts. Yeah. Well, luckily...
Oh, and I wonder if I rewatch it, the whole Gaius Baltar line will probably be like, "Oh, we couldn't elect someone that stupid."
Oh yeah, that's gonna feel extra relevant. It's like, yeah, we obviously will see through that. Yeah, but if you're a lover of space battles, then you are in luck today because we're talking about The Last Starfighter. This movie was released July 13th, 1984. It's directed by Nick Castle, written by Jonathan R. Butel, and it stars Lance Guest, Catherine Mary Stewart, Dan O'Herlihy, Norman Snow, baby Will Wheaton in a tiny little cameo, and Robert Preston. So I don't know what y'all's experience with The Last Starfighter is. Last Starfighter is definitely like one of those canonical cult movies for guys my age.
And girls.
And girls your age as well. Because, I mean, it's one that was never necessarily one of my movies, but this really fits into this kind of nerd wish fulfillment trope that was very popular, continues to be popular. Everything from Star Wars to Harry Potter.
I think this is a continuing question that
Yeah.
this podcast seeks to answer. Is young J-Ban stupid?
Oh,
Is that the question we've been trying to answer?
But like, for example, I loved the pirate movie.
You love it so much that you don't
Oh,
even...
Cutthroat Island. Yeah.
Cutthroat
There you
Island.
go.
Yeah.
One of the biggest bombs in history. And like,
Yeah.
I still maintain that, like, even on the second watch, I still loved it.
Yeah.
Rewatching the Starfighter, it's a less flawed movie, but I don't feel like I loved this movie when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you could play a video game, and like I still love this whole trope because
Yeah.
there was a TV series called Future Man,
Yeah.
that also had the trope of playing the video game and then being thrust into a sci-fi. By the way, if you haven't watched Future Man, just do it.
Future Man is
it's
funny.
disgustingly hilarious.
When
I love
did-
it so much.
When did it come out?
That was like 5 years ago, right?
Okay.
Roughly.
Yeah.
It was on Hulu. It's got Josh Hutcherson, and he's basically.
Is it still on Hulu?
I
it's on
just,
Hulu.
unfortunate.
is it still okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there? I
My
only,
least favorite of the streaming services, but...
Well, there
It's
you
my
go.
favorite streaming service.
Really?
Yeah.
I should
feel like
mention
you
this
get it
had.
episode
for
is
free.
sponsored by Hulu. No,
I
I'm
do
kidding.
too.
I get it free with my Spotify
Yeah.
subscription.
Oh, okay.
But it's like the most ad version, and I'm like, I have it to the point of where I don't get ads on my computer, but if I want to like chill and watch it on the couch or something, I have to deal with ads.
Yeah.
I don't mind Hulu ads except for during election seasons. During
Oh,
election
yeah.
season, I will pay for ad-free versions.
That tracks, yeah.
Because they think because they think advertising Donald Trump to me will win, and I'm just like, no,
Yeah, switch those off.
I'm a chick.
They just go for the blanket. You live in Texas.
You live in
Yeah,
Texas.
yeah, obviously. I mean, I think Austin is technically independent of Texas. I haven't seen that Civil War movie yet, but I assume that's what that's about.
I haven't either, but I'm assuming it starts with the state police storming Austin and taking it back.
Sure, yeah, must happen.
I don't know. I was very reticent to see Civil War, but it's like it's done 2 weekends in a row, and it seems to have gotten really good reviews.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
I'm like, maybe my prejudice, like, because I just wasn't, excuse me, in the mood for a Civil War style movie.
Oh, I get that, yeah.
In the election year,
Yeah, when it seems...
when it seems most
Ever-
likely to
When
come
my
true.
human rights were taken from me by the Supreme
Yeah.
Court.
Yeah, yeah.
I did hear that the Henry Cavill movie did really well, though.
Oh, it kind of bombed this weekend.
did
actually.
it?
Yeah, oh yeah, it was like
Interesting.
3rd or 4th this weekend, something like that. Yeah, it's...
Guy Ritchie's never hit the mainstream though.
I mean, he directed that crappy live-action Aladdin remake, so that was a huge hit, but it's not good. But
Is that why he's making so much stuff? Because he's got carte blanche
I
for
think
making
he-
Disney money?
He might have a little bit of that. Yeah, he's just cranking them out lately.
He directed the live action Aladdin with Will Smith.
Yes, yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, that was him.
Okay, that's the only
So-
Aladdin I've ever seen. So
That's the only Aladdin. Oh my god. Well, we're gonna get to that episode, which some people consider
But
the greatest video game
back
based
to the
game of all
thing.
time. Or,
As a
movie-based
child,
game.
you watched this as a child.
Yeah.
Nope.
Did you love this film as a child?
I did not see it until I was in my late teens, early 20s. So this
Okay.
is one I missed out on. But it sounds like this is one that was in your
Did
rotation
you-
when you were a kid.
Yes.
Did you feel like you could be the main character at that point? You're like, oh wow.
Oh, I think he was significantly older than me at that point. He's got to be 45 in this. No, I'm kidding. It's just, young people
Yeah.
in the 80s just look so
Yeah.
much older than they actually are. But yeah, no, this one was not really in my rotation, even though it is very much sort of built for young Steve. Like, this was a movie about aliens and space fighters, and oh, if you're really good at a video game, an alien will whisk you away to save the universe. That is extremely Steve shit, and I'm wondering if I wouldn't have a fonder opinion. Now, I should preface this with saying I think this movie's perfectly charming. I really enjoy watching this movie. This is only the second time I've seen it. I had a lot of fun with it. It doesn't connect with me in that super nostalgic way. I think it's kind of slow in the
See,
middle, and it's
I
got
think-
some flaws.
So
but
I think it was so pivotal to me when as a child that I was just like it was like right up there with a lot of my favorite films. I just love and if like okay, I love Star Wars more. However, this felt more accessible. Like, because I lived in trailer parks as a small child. So,
Yeah.
like, this kid lives in a trailer park, plays arcade games. I was a kid who lived in a trailer park who played arcade games. And it was just really fun and accessible. And I liked the aliens and, like, the beta bot. But I just had a hard time staying connected and focused to this film as an adult.
Well, because a lot of it. Well, we can kind of dig into this, but I'm curious. Justin, is this the first time viewing for you?
I heard of the movie last week.
Oh,
so,
okay. All right. First time everything with it.
100%.
All right. So you don't come to this with any baggage. I come to it with minimal, and you come to it with a good mix of nostalgia. So I think this is a good
Yeah,
mix
you're
to
bringing a
approach
lot
this
of
movie.
baggage into this, J-Ban. I'm going to need you to separate yourself from it. This is a no baggage zone.
My childhood is a part of this podcast.
It absolutely is.
Both of
I
our-
didn't
or
mean
three of
baggage.
ours
I
are.
didn't mean baggage in a negative way. I more meant to just that we're bringing very different perspectives to this movie. Where I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm sort of split the difference here.
I packed light for this trip.
Oh, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. We have limited cargo room. A little bit about the production of this movie, because this is kind of an important movie in a couple of interesting ways. So first of all, this is the second ever directorial film of Nick Castle. Do we remember who Nick Castle is? We talked about him once before.
Frank Castle's brother.
Very close. He directed a movie that we kind of touched on very briefly in the Gotcha episode. He directed the other paintball movie, Tag, the assassination game, which I actually watched. But he's probably better known as Michael Myers. He's the original Michael Myers from Halloween. He is a hulking guy, a big, tall friend of John Carpenter, who became a fairly successful filmmaker in his own right. He co-wrote Escape from New York, and then he directed this movie. He directed like Dennis the Menace and like Major Payne and a bunch of other like kind of marginal comedies in the 90s. So, but yeah, no, he's had a pretty long career, and I think this is probably his best and best known movie that he's directed. But yeah, that is Michael Myers behind this film. This movie is mostly important in the history of special effects, because this is one of the earliest films to make really extensive use of computer-generated graphics
and like full 3D models, not just 2D.
Because prior to this, the movie that's used CGI the most is Tron, right, from 1982. But Tron is expressionistic, right? Tron is about like we are being brought into this alien world, so nothing needs to look super like realistic or have any kind of realistic textures. This is a movie that's trying to take a step further than that and saying, okay, these ships that we're seeing are interacting with, they're diegetic, all right? They are in the real world of this movie, which is pretty cool. Oh, sorry, our fidget toys have been scattered to the winds. My apologies. The cat kept knocking them off the table and swatting the silly putty around. But yeah, so it's pretty important in that regard, you know. And I think so. This movie has 27 minutes of computer-generated special effects, which is really quite impressive. And at the time, Justin, as a computer nerd, you'll appreciate this. These were painstakingly rendered using Fortran. Which is one of the earliest computer languages. So they, at the time, these computer effects were about half as expensive and took about a third of the time of practical special effects. I think that model has pretty much flipped over the years. I think it's now the opposite way. It'd be much, much cheaper to build a T-Rex than to animate a T-Rex.
I think the stakes are different now. It's that same thing where, and it's something that happens a lot with when you're blending animation with live action, and it was less of a thing at this time. Yeah. But you either have to blend it really well, or you have a world that already creates the sense of disbelief. Yeah. Where it is animated or it is semi-animated. And in a movie like this, where you just have the occasional like ships and stuff, you would spend a lot of time blending the 3D, making it look really good, making it look photoreal. Yeah. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. No. But then you might end up with Spy Kids 3D. There you go. And you're like, look, guy.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it looks a little goofy, and you know, honestly, sometimes some of the effects in this movie look pretty goofy. They look like, you know, maybe an early PlayStation 1 at some times, but it's crisp, and there are textures, there are lighting effects that they're taking into account.
What time did the PlayStation 1 release?
95.
Right. Yeah. This is 11 years earlier. Yeah. It's honestly pretty impressive considering this is coming off of kind of the dawn of the golden age of sci-fi to a degree, with, you know, Star Wars going into when did Star Trek start?
Star Trek started in the 60s. I would almost argue, I don't know, I would almost argue that this post-Star Wars era that we're in 1984 when this movie comes out is sort of the lowest ebb for like genre stuff, like sci-fi and like fantasy stuff. Kind of took a long time to sort of figure itself out after.
When did Episode 6 come out?
That was 1983. So yeah, Return of the Jedi was already out. Blade Runner was already out. So there is this kind of long period in the late 80s where sci-fi is still sort of figuring out what it's going to look like in this next generation.
The majority of effects, and I haven't really analyzed the Star Wars films, but that was all practical with miniatures, and there was a lot of effort put into real practical effects. Yeah. Whereas this movie tried something different. It was like, all right, we're going to be, I don't know how much special effects had been used in movies to this date that weren't very, very effect heavy.
No, not much. But, you know, we like we said Tron was kind of the most we'd seen it. We'd seen some, the very first Pixar work was in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. They animated the planet like exploding at the end of that movie. So like we're starting to see some of it. Yeah. And then within, by 1985, there's this movie called The Adventures of Young Sherlock Holmes, where we get a CGI character interacting with human figures, like a living stained glass monster comes to life and like fights off the kids. Like, so that was an important little step forward, like of integrating the two. The special effects we see in this, it's kind of like, all right, here's a live action, and then we're cutting away to this animated sequence over here.
In space.
Exactly, yeah.
For lack of a better term, and I think it's pretty appropriate, this is like kind of the beginning of the new frontier of effects.
It is,
where
yeah.
they're transitioning to, instead of relying on computers to mostly touch things up afterwards or make very minor modifications, like the ridiculous Han Solo deal.
In
episode 4.
Yeah, where he's
always
stepping
think
on
one,
Jabba's
but
tail, or the neck thing.
The neck thing, that's the one where he's dodging.
McClunky. Yeah.
But yeah, for them to have gone so hard and to do all of the ships and even the station in full 3D, is very interesting to do. Definitely taking a risk.
Well, there's been a lot of talk in recent years that like animation technology is kind of plateauing, you know, because if you look at this movie, like you were saying, compare 1984 to 1994 when the PlayStation comes out, like that's 10 years from like trying out this technology in movies to see if it could look possibly realistic to interacting with it. Whereas while movie special effects were exploding at this time, and we see that rapid progression, and then lately it's kind of reached a point where like, all right, well this looks as good as it can possibly look.
We've hit
what's
the point.
next. Yeah, now we need to start stylizing it. Now we need to start kind of finding interesting ways to approach frame rates, things like that.
The things that'll be more interesting, the developments that'll be more interesting and more big in kind of quotes are not going to be major things. It's going to be small stuff like the de-aging processes and stuff. It'll be stuff like that were previously considered impossible.
Yeah.
There are still some things with fluids that are difficult to do well, but you're right. We've hit that point of where photoreal is very much possible.
Yeah, absolutely. If you, I mean, just play like even like a Last of Us from a couple years ago or something, or Last of Us 2, like it's looking pretty tremendous, and it looks very realistic, and you're reaching a point where it's like, how much more are we going to do?
The developments that we're going to have are going to be in render times.
Yeah.
Where, like you said, in how just rendering the simple geometry for this with basic textures. I don't even think there was much. It's mostly just solid colors.
Yeah, pretty much.
If there is even a texture on there,
there's
which they didn't really.
You could see some of the spaceships have like some details, and some texture, but there's a lot of also just like laser beam line, you know.
And it was the stuff of like early Pixar. The amount of time it took them to render out all the sequences took forever.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's much quicker. Instead of the movie taking like a month to render, you can render shots, go to lunch and come back and be looking at it, and that's where we're going to see the most, but it's not going to make things look better.
And this movie was an important sort of test pilot for that idea, because yes, this looks primitive, but it doesn't look embarrassing. It doesn't look lazy or bad. It looks like they were doing the really quite good work with very primitive technology, so it's cool to see. Like, I remember watching this the first time and really not even clocking that the graphics looked primitive. I was just kind of brought into it, you know, and I'm like, all right, this looks fine. And watching it again now, I'm like, it's on a big HD TV, and it's been a remastered, you know, Blu-ray and everything.
I was
like,
watching 720 Blu-ray.
Yeah, it looks fine. It looks totally fine.
It's interesting to note that they also did use practical effects for some things. Like I really liked when Beta was like cooking.
That freaked me out.
I love those types of practical effects.
Me too. Yeah.
And
the star car was practical. At least part of it was practical.
Yeah, I think they transitioned in a few between practical and whatever.
When did the DeLorean come out?
DeLorean. Because all I know is that by the time Back to the Future came out in '85, the DeLorean was a joke. That's why, like, it was supposed to be funny that he brought out a time machine as a DeLorean. So DeLorean would have been '82 or '83, maybe. Okay. And then it just bombed, right? It was like a huge disaster. And then Back to the Future made it a collector's item.
Turns out it is not convenient to make a car with stainless steel body panels.
Who could learn a lesson from that right now, I wonder?
Seems oddly topical.
Somebody pointed out on Twitter that like there's an old, like very early like 80s PC game called Design a Car, where you have to like design your own vehicle and then put it in a wind tunnel. And the design, the considered quote unquote perfect design of a car that performs the best in the wind tunnel is the exact shape of a Cybertruck. So some people think that he just like stumbled upon that when he was a kid and just stuck with it. But it looks identical and it's bizarre.
That's great.
Every time I see some of those around town sometimes, and it just looks like a glitch. It looks like I drove into like Wipeout or something.
They don't even have cool turn signals, which is huge. The taillight's also pretty lame.
I have to say, I think the regular Tesla, I took an Uber and I was inside the Tesla and I found it quite nice. Quite nice. But I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It's just like a lot of, I mean, and I wouldn't want to be in it during the summertime, but there's a lot of really pretty glass.
It's a very huge, like, touchscreen monitor in there. Like,
I feel like it's distracting.
Excessively huge, yeah.
But like the sitting in the back and being driven around, and it definitely felt very futuristic and fun. The Cybertruck, on the other hand, I don't get it.
I don't get it. Because it's also like a shitty car, right? Isn't that a thing? It's like a shitty car that like the coating strips away and like it's
the stainless steel can corrode. It's not coated or treated in any way. You have to pay extra for that. Apparently, people are experiencing damage in car washes. Like electrical damage in car washes. That's because they have to. There's like a specific car wash mode to put the car in.
Yeah.
Which for the most part doesn't do a ton of crazy things other than just make sure the windows are rolled up. The trunk and the back of the truck is all sealed up.
Yeah.
But it also turns the AC to off or circulate and closes the door because the intake doesn't have. It's my understanding, and I don't know this for sure. I haven't looked at one. But the intake doesn't have a kink in it at all, so that any water that comes into the air intake ends up going through into the car.
Okay.
Through the
how much money would
air
it
conditioning
take?
System
would have to be paid to you to drive a Cybertruck?
To drive one? Now, here's the thing.
Like
you mean
as
like
your vehicle, as
my
vehicle.
daily driver?
Yeah.
As your daily driver, and you'd have to have it for 5 years.
For 5 years, honestly, if you gave me one, I would do it for the memes.
Wow.
Like, I wouldn't pay for it at all.
Yeah.
But if somebody was just like, here's this, you have to drive for 5 years, I'd be like, well, I was gonna buy a Nissan pickup truck, but sure. All right.
I'd be fine.
For the memes.
I'd be fine doing it, but I'm not single, so that might... I don't know. I just feel like that thing would be like a lady boner killer. I don't know. You see, like, oh, good. He drives around in Star Fox's car. I guess I don't know what to tell you.
I would love a Star Fox car.
If they painted it up like a Star Fox vehicle, that would be.
I would probably get it wrapped with something again for the memes. Like I would make it look like the Star Fox ship or something dumb,
or a Starfighter. Make it look like a Starfighter.
Yeah.
From this, make it look like make it look like the CGI
Star
version
car.
of the Star Car.
Is that what it's actually
That's what
called?
it's
The
called,
Star
yeah.
Car.
Well,
Okay.
that's what the land vehicle is called.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was doing my laundry at that point, hanging it up, and so I was like in and out of the room. And I say in and out of the room.
Yeah.
I was walking into the closet a lot.
Okay.
And so a few words got missed.
Yeah.
What was the Starfighter called?
I thought it was just the Starfighter. I might be
No,
wrong. That's what their
They had a
title is.
special
They had a
name.
special name. It was
Okay.
It's like the
War Star or something.
no, I think it's like gun something.
Okay, yeah,
Hold
gunship,
on,
yeah.
I got this.
Gunstar Hero.
I think
The whole
actually
point
might
I was
be it.
I was trying to make that it's a complete ripoff of
It is a Gunstar.
Nice.
Gunstar.
Gunstar.
It's a complete ripoff of a Star Wars ship that I used to have the name memorized, but I'm both ashamed that I don't remember and proud that I don't remember.
All right. Yeah, you're like, okay, I've just got some of my cool back. I don't need to hold on to every one of these things.
I don't need. I used to get like specs of ships from like Goodwill. Like I got the specs of a Star Trek ship.
Oh, like the posters, like with
and I was just like, I love the posters when they have ships compared to other sizes of ships.
Oh, yeah.
I love them
yeah.
I love starships.
See, you love
I love
space
seeing
stuff.
them
This
pop
is-
up on Reddit. Absolutely, it's a great time.
Did you have those?
look up the name of the Star Wars ship that I copied of?
No,
Okay.
All right. Yeah, but I don't know.
I think it's a Bespin. Bespin is a
Bespin
planet.
is a cloud city.
It's
Are you talking about the little kind of globular ones that fly around in that area?
They're the one. Okay, y'all talk.
Yes. All right. So we're in the
cloud car. I'd forgotten about the cloud car.
we're in the
not what you were talking about.
We're in the googling
100%
spaceships part of our program right now. But yeah, I do
Not
want
a bad thing to do.
I want to shout out the cast a little bit here too. Our lead is a guy named Lance Guest. I think a likable guy. He's got a likable kind of presence. He'd previously had a strong supporting role in Halloween 2, and sadly, I don't think his career really survived his lead role in Jaws 4: The Revenge, universally considered the worst Jaws movie. But I think the real cast member I want to shout out here, as a Broadway nerd, as a musical theater nerd, I have to shout out Robert Preston. This is his very final role. He plays Centauri, and this guy is just a Broadway legend. He's one of those guys. So he originated the role of Harold Hill in The Music Man. He starred in the movie, and it's one of those performances that's just like, oh yeah, okay, everybody from now on is going to be chasing this performance and really trying to like top it, and no one really ever has. He didn't really do many movies, but this was his very last one. He died in 1987. But
I love The Music Man. I feel like
me
it's so
too.
underrated. It's so like, I mean, not underrated. Everyone knows it's great.
It's beloved, but
it's beloved, but it's so charming, and like the guy, he's playing Harold Hill in this.
They wrote the character to be like Harold Hill. They wanted Centauri to feel a little mischievous, to feel maybe he's like a little bit of a con man, but like a well-meaning con man. And I think Robert Preston is having so much fun with that. And it's just so funny to hear this like Harold Hill kind of delivery when he's saying like nonsense alien words, or sometimes even speaking nonsense alien languages with other aliens. And he's committed and he's having fun. And he's still got that twinkle in his eye, He's actually not even that old. He died in 1987. He was 68. So like he's not even that elderly, but he's got a great energy to him. And I also love Catherine Mary Stewart in this. She is in one of my favorite bad movies called The Apple. Do you know The Apple?
Is that the girlfriend?
Yeah. So The Apple is a dystopian roller disco musical that is insane and so much fun. We'll have to watch that sometime. It's a crazy canon film, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, so this movie overall, it was a modest.
I thought it was really interesting. Sorry, do you want to finish?
Oh no,
wrap up?
This was not important.
So it was really interesting how they portrayed the girlfriend, and how like the beta was like, "You sex crazed fiend," when she's like nibbling on his ear.
Yeah. I wanted more of the intercutting between what's going on in space and what's going on at the trailer park. They do a little bit of that, but for those who aren't familiar, just the very basic structure of this is that Lance Guest plays a kid who is his mother is the operator of a very cute little trailer park. Honestly, like this is a very charming little setup they've got here. They've got like a community, they've got a little diner, they've got a cool arcade game. Like, it's not bad. If you're going to live in a trailer park, this one's the one to choose. But
Starlight, Starbright. That's the name of it.
Starlight, Starbright. It's cute. It's very charming. And, like, everybody's, like, a little askew and a little wacky, but they're all well-meaning. But he's restless. He's a kid. He wants to get out there, but he can't get into college. But he is really, really good at Starfighter, which is the arcade cabinet that they have in the complex. And one day he sets the all-time high score, defeats all the enemies, and then gets a visit from a mysterious stranger named Centauri, who takes him to outer space and reveals that this arcade game was all just a secret training device to see who could live up to being a starfighter and help them take on the Kodan Armada in a real space
This was an
battle.
abduction.
It was
right?
an abduction, kind of.
Okay.
It was definitely start off as an abduction, and we got the Harold Hills Centauri character getting paid.
Yeah.
So he's just like getting paid a lot of money for dropping off this starfighter, and like a very dubious like recruitment process.
Yeah, he's kind of a shady figure, which is what makes him fun. Like you can tell he means very well. He's almost got like a Tom Bombadil energy of like, I'm everywhere all the time, I know everything, and I'm not really going to help, but I'm not going to hurt your situation either. So I like that. And yeah, I agree with you. This whole setup is an alien abduction, and then they just kind of guilt him into staying, but also like they call down assassins, interstellar assassins that are going to be looking for him and possibly hurting his family if he doesn't stay. He did not sign up for this when he got really good at this video game. There's no way he could have known that this was happening.
And he's technically a child soldier.
I guess. I mean,
I don't
he's
know,
18. He's 18.
I feel like he's definitely 18.
He's got to be.
Well, he is trying to go to college, so
Yeah, he's a tall kid. I don't know. Again, it's so hard to tell. He is a 24-year-old man when this movie is shooting.
Yeah.
He looks 40, but now he's in his 60s and he still looks 40. So like, I don't know. It's just really hard to tell. I think it was just the hairstyles and the fashions of the 80s. It's just it aged people up.
I
all
loved
black.
that girl's hair. Oh my god, so fluffy.
So fluffy.
So fluffy.
She's a cutie. I really like her. I wish she had more to do in this movie. Because a lot of her role is kind of reduced to like acting confused when Beta is acting weird, and that is a fun element. They leave behind this like clone slug robot thing that looks exactly like the kid, and he has to pretend to be him. And like you said, there's this formation sequence where he's just like this little pulsating, like massive robot tissue that's forming under a blanket until it looks like him. And it looks really creepy, but it's funny when it reveals itself. And there's a fun dynamic here because this robot has the kid's personality and kind of knows some of his memories, but he is also not 100% familiar with all the things he's taking in. So like
he's not familiar with human social norms and or not norms.
Yeah. So it's like he's got the overview, and then he's just kind of like riffing on the details a little bit in a fun way.
Yes.
And yeah, I wanted more of that. I wanted more of this dynamic of going back and forth, because a lot of what we have in the movie once he gets into outer space is just a lot of trying to talk the kid into taking the mission, and B, a lot of learning how to fly the plane. He's got
the plane
or the star, the Gunstar. He's got a very grizzled alien co-pilot named Grig, voiced by Dan O'Herlihy from RoboCop and Halloween 3. Lots of Halloween vets in this movie. We have one from 1, one from 2, one from 3. All right, anyway. But yeah.
The trilogy is complete.
And that's sort of where the movie lost me a little bit, because while I think the action sequences are well done, and the world building is clever, and there's a lot of fun stuff going on, it's just not as compelling.
It wasn't as
fish out of
compelling.
water.
The aliens weren't as interesting. Like they had a lot of aliens with this like male pattern baldness curls.
This is such
like
a-
out of an
yeah.
Oompa Loompa haircut.
Yeah, even all the women just have like full receding hairlines with like a ring going around, and like it's
Oompa Loompa haircuts.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And then you're right. Some of the other alien
My
designs
worst nightmare.
feel a little lazier. Like there's a guy who's just a bunch of tentacles, and then some of the puppets, like their mouths don't really move or anything, so they're communicating psychically.
They do a thing where there's a few of the aliens that are just like vague faces. And you're like, okay.
Kind of fleshy.
Well, and sorry.
What the fuck just happened?
I interrupted you to change the subject.
I didn't realize I was on one.
No, because I had a thought.
Please.
And now if that thought is still there, I thought it was like, so instead of having the protagonist want to be excited. Like they make him very reluctant, and they make him reluctant for too long, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. This movie is a really good demonstration of like the Joseph Campbell thing, you know, the hero's or the hero's journey, that whole trope that makes for a good storytelling. And he gets to the point where he needs to refuse the call, and that just goes on for quite a bit too long. And you understand his reluctance because, again, he did not sign up for any of this. Like, Harry Potter wish fulfillment is like you are going to a magical world where the pros outweigh the cons. This is like, oh, hey, you're conscripted into a war you didn't know existed. Now you're going to go get in a spaceship that you can't fly.
I was
and
going to say,
possibly
that
die.
is somewhat similar to
And
Harry
not to
Potter.
mention, like, well, and I did feel for him when he didn't want to push the button for a really long time, because I'm just like, there's a difference between like playing a video game and killing some entity or a, like, you know, a living being.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where once he's like, I don't want to be here, Grig was just kind of like, I mean, you sure? And then Centauri was like, whoa, wait a minute, I want to get paid. And then nobody sat down and was like, yeah, so here's the deal. Once they do this thing, they're going to do this thing. And then, you know, because they do at one point mention that Earth is going to be at risk too.
Right.
Like, they don't drive home like, hey, you know, you're not just joining a war for like us.
Yeah.
Your planet's possibly going to die or be irrevocably changed.
Right.
And these people, they have the military strategy of putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
the Wikipedia article I found like was like, if you like this, you'll also like Ender's Game, and that is something I kept thinking about while watching this movie. It's like Ender's Game goes so deep into the strategy of everything, and this one, it doesn't seem like it's as fully formed out. You know, the other movie that really takes a lot from this that I hadn't been thinking about until just now is Galaxy Quest.
Oh, I love Galaxy
Very
Quest.
much the same thing. You know, it's like you're getting taken into. Oh, Galaxy Quest is so good.
So good.
It's so wonderful.
So good. Alan Rickman.
Oh, so
Sigourney
good.
Weaver.
Ooh, Tim Allen.
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell in that movie is so funny too. Yeah,
Sam Rockwell's fantastic.
Sam
He's so good.
Rockwell?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are really hyping this.
Oh, this
I-
movie you're gonna love Galaxy Quest.
I
Jim,
have
so.
watched the shittiest movies with Sam Rockwell, and I was completely charmed by them.
Oh yeah,
Like,
no,
he's so charming.
He always brings a little something. You know, he always tries. He's always entertaining at the very least.
One of my favorite movies is Iron Man because it's one of the movies that like really like hit me, and I'm like, oh, this is like good, semi-realistic sci-fi, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Iron Man 2 came out, and I was like, this is not as good as the last movie, but Sam Rockwell definitely, in my opinion, makes it worth watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he absolutely, every time I see a movie and he's in it, I usually don't expect it, and then he shows up and I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna be a good time. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna enjoy whatever character this rascal plays.
Yeah, I mean, so I always like I said, this is only the second time I watched this movie, and both times I'm like, I'm really primed to be super into it. I'm really into like the first third of it, and I'm just like, okay, I mean, maybe I'm underrating this in my mind. And then there is just kind of a long sort of squishy middle there, and I think it brings it home by the end. But we spend so much
They
time.
could have cut like 15 minutes out of the movie.
You probably could. It's
I
not
think
that
making
long
it
of a movie, but
it's an
like,
hour 40.
It's an
and
hour 40, which feels a
you
little
feel
bloated.
the extra 10.
Yeah.
And so we haven't talked about somebody in this movie that must be spoken of.
Who is this?
And that's the villain.
Oh yeah, okay. See, Zur is kind of a forgettable villain here, right? In my opinion.
I think he's unforgettable. He's so like over the top. He's
very-
like one of the most over the top villains I have ever seen. And like classic battle strategy. I'm like, it's just such a paint by numbers villain.
Yeah.
In this movie, and like and they keep going back and forth about whether or not he has any status or if he's just a dumbass.
Because what is he? He's like the son of the emperor who's like rebelling.
He's rebelling, and he has a scepter with a knife in it.
So he's like petulant. That's kind of the vibe that he's sort of playing in this. Like, and he's kind of a whiny little blowhard, but he is a threat. You know, he is kind of threatening, almost like a he's like a sleeper cell or something like that. You know, I don't know. He's the carrot that's sort of dangling at the end of the stick, but he's never really that important of a presence in this movie to
Well,
me.
he doesn't. So, like, I think that's an interesting thing that they could have done is they could have had him have actual menace. They
Right.
make it seem like this battle like has actual consequences, but they don't have people mourning for their dead. They don't have people like when the starfighters are they're like, oh no, I guess we got to get the last starfighter because all the other starfighters are dead.
Yeah.
You know, like they don't say, dear, thank you for all the starfighters who've gone before.
No.
You know what I mean?
At that point, I was like, yeah, there's more people alive here, right? It's
Yeah.
not just these two hanging out.
Well, yeah, and he's kind of a fun, like, big operatic villain, and this is a movie we should mention that really has no problem leaning into the silly. And I think a lot of sci-fi movies of this era do that because the people making it grew up in the 50s and 60s watching serials and watching these kind of B pictures that were goofy and that were like a little bit more shamefacedly like silly.
The film that I think is the best B movie of the 1950s because of all the joy it's given me throughout my life.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna take a wild stab here. All About Eve. I don't know.
That's not a B
not a B
horror
movie at all.
Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, the original Little Shop. Yeah.
There's nothing better than watching like the musical and then going back and watching the original Little Shop of Horrors, and you're just like,
It's
the
a wild
people,
movie.
they were
Jack
genius.
Nicholson.
They
Yeah.
were geniuses.
They shot that movie in 2 days. It was at the time. I think it still holds the record for the fastest film shoot. Maybe it's probably been beaten by somebody who made something on an iPhone. But yeah, no, for a long time it was the cheapest and it was the fastest shot movie ever made, and it is a lot of fun. Yeah, very silly, very sloppy, but a lot of fun. But yeah, I think that's sort of where I come down on The Last Starfighter. I dig it. I want to dig it more than I do, and it's definitely one of those movies that I feel. It sort of loomed sort of large for me when I was in high school, and like because a lot of people were sort of coming around on 80s nostalgia stuff, and people were like, "Oh yeah, remember Last Starfighter? That thing was awesome." So I came around to it later than a lot of people did, and it didn't have the same sort of like cult place in my life as I was growing up. But I do enjoy what this movie is trying to do. And I think it's an important movie for special effects, and it's also been hugely influential in a lot of ways. So yeah, like we mentioned Galaxy Quest, like
Future Man,
pretty much everything. Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One, owes kind of his whole career to Last Starfighter, really, in a lot of ways. Like
Is
it
this
even
where-
opens in a trailer park.
is this where that trope started of a nerd playing a video game and then saving the day?
I mean, it must be, right? Because I can't think of an earlier time when like video games would have had the cultural crossover to sort of make that.
Does Snakes on a Plane technically count in this category?
Do they do that in Snakes on a Plane?
The guy, one of the passengers, lands the plane because he'd played a lot of games on the PlayStation.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that. Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's kind of this idea, but like Ernest Cline's second book was called Armada, and it is just The Last Starfighter. It's a kid who's really good at video games and gets beamed up to outer space to help take part in a space war. You know, he's even using that word specifically. Like the Kodan Armada becomes the Armada. And I haven't read that book, but I think it is pretty much a one-to-one.
I think it's such an interesting concept because it was happening then, but it's happened so much in so many ways since... this movie came out.
Yeah.
But especially in the United States, the military has a crazy amount of like influence into our media.
Yeah.
I don't know when this program started, but I know it was before the 80s because what was with Sheen's brother, Charlie Sheen's
Emilio
brother,
Estevez?
Sheen.
Yeah, Emilio Estevez.
Vietnam.
You're thinking of Apocalypse Now?
Yes,
What?
Apocalypse
Oh,
Now.
yeah. That's Martin Sheen is Charlie Sheen's father.
Father?
Yeah, that's his father.
Shit.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like Apocalypse Now definitely leveraged this where the U.S. government will give you resources and stuff if you make games, movies, whatever, that
That could
promotes
be
the
used as a
messages
recruiting
that they
tool.
want. Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, there are video games in modern days. I think it's kind of cooled off a little bit because they got a little too obvious with it. And people were like,
I
don't wanna play
remember
this.
there was an Xbox game called Full Spectrum Warrior that was allegedly like based off of the training video games that they had soldiers play, but I don't know if that's actually true.
There was a series called America's Army that was like made in partnership with the U.S. military.
That might be the one I'm thinking of. Yeah,
but there's so much of that's happened, and it's like the idea that somebody could play a video game and be good at it isn't unheard, and like be recruited to something isn't too far out of especially in modern society where things are getting kind of crazy, where
or if we think of a more grounded recent example, the Gran Turismo movie covers that exact thing.
Yeah.
It's some kid who's really good at Gran Turismo becomes a racer.
And I like that story because people
Did you
don't
watch
die
that
in
movie?
it.
I did.
How was it?
Too.
It's like
It was okay.
entertaining and also kind of reprehensible because it is pretty shamelessly like a 2.5 hour PlayStation commercial. Like even the exterior shots of the races are just footage from the latest Gran Turismo. It's just kind of showing off how good the game looks, but it's also like this game is so good that you could become a world champion by getting good at it. It's so realistic.
They did this
kind of
weird
fun, but
thing
yeah.
where they kind of rewrote the timeline too.
Right, because he did it
of
really
the actual
fast.
events.
Yeah.
So one, have him do it really fast, but to two, they kind of build it up as like he's the only guy who's ever done this.
Yeah.
But he was like the 6th person to graduate from the program into
Yeah, he was just
real
the
racing.
first who was like good at it.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily just they're so good at it because they kind of mention it, but then don't mention it when they get to Le Mans.
Oh yeah.
But he was racing with a team of 2 people who graduated before him.
Oh, okay.
So he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
his whole team was other people who had gone through the same program
yeah.
and were now at that level.
I mean, they have to take some license with it.
Yeah, they
but-
take some license
but
with
it's
it.
kind of the same sort of idea.
They gamify some things here and there. I
Yeah.
watched it with my parents, and it wasn't anything. I thought it was okay. It was nothing I wouldn't have expected going into it.
Yeah.
David Harbour, I like, and he was good.
Any video game that you were, say, really good at, and you could be transformed into that world as a hero with your skills, what video game?
Lego Island.
See, that's a good one. You're being nicer to yourself. I'm thinking like the games
those games as a kid.
the games I'm really good at are the ones I would not want to spend time in the world in real life. So
Same.
like I'm very good at Portal. I'm very good at I've been playing a lot of Fallout lately. It's like I'm really good at Fallout. I love exploring that, but I'm also like I don't want to be in this world. This seems terrible.
Me and my roommates have had the argument of how dangerous would the Pokemon world really be to live in?
Yeah.
And the answer was, I don't want to live there.
No.
That shit's wild. There's Pokemon that just lure kids out into the forest so they can abduct them and kill them.
Yeah.
Insane.
It's crazy.
But I've played a lot of like tactical games and stuff, and I think that's generally where I end up doing the best at. I don't know.
This could be in like an XCOM or something.
Yeah.
How about you, J-Ban? Where would you go?
This is really hard for me because my favorite game of all time is Fallout.
Yeah.
So, but that's
You don't wanna
like
go there.
We're gonna fucking die there, all
Yeah,
three
like-
of us together.
I'm immediately a ghoul. Yeah.
like I just like because like it would be really awful to live there. It's just like the
100%.
best part about doing Fallout the video game is wandering around and like finding shit and being attacked by death claws.
Yeah.
Which would suck in real life.
Yeah, I don't want it.
I don't know. I did play this game called Fable for a while.
yeah.
Fable is super fun.
And I had, like,
Ailish loves Sable. Yeah.
Multiple families in multiple cities, which I don't think I would.
Are you saying that's
something
aspirational? Are you setting up franchises?
setting up franchises.
Well, like, what's better, Fable or Skyrim?
I mean, Skyrim's got the Fallout problem,
Fable
right?
2.
Like where it's a beautiful world to explore, but like you're beset by danger at all times. Like Fable, at least there are people you can dominate and impregnate and abandon. Apparently, is the way you play it. Yeah,
I think I enjoyed Fable 2 more than Skyrim.
okay.
Fable 2 was pretty good.
All right. Yeah.
Fable 3 was okay.
I never played it. But,
Similar gameplay, just not as good story. But
we should segue to the game here.
Oh yeah,
because
before we get
we're talking about games. It's
that's the
segue.
thing, exactly. And this is interesting because I think more than any other game movie we've talked about so far, I would say this is the one that makes the most sense to make a video game adaptation of, right? Like,
yeah,
and
100%.
And they kind of fumbled it.
To the point of where I assumed the game existed, but
Right.
then like as I was watching it, I was like, and it makes sense now knowing what I do. I
Yeah.
was like, I mean, rendering this live on an arcade cabinet would have been computationally heavy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that, but it turns out no, the whole game was fake.
Yeah, exactly.
Was not real.
So they did try to capitalize on this right away because obviously video games are such an important part of this movie. More and more movies are being adapted into games around this time. However, we also just came off of the E.T. Atari crash of 1983. So video games are a little bit of a toxic property right now.
Oh, that's a good point.
They develop a Last Starfighter game that they want to have come out on the Atari 2600 and the subsequent follow-up, the 5200. The 2600 version gets canceled outright. The 5200 gets released 3 years later, but under a different title. It was now called Star Raiders 2, and they made it the sequel to a kind of forgotten other Atari game. So when the last Starfighter video game that we're talking about today actually came out on the NES, it was already 1990, so that's 6 years after the movie came and went. And it's not even a Last Starfighter game. Okay, this is a very, very, very lightly reskinned version of a Commodore 64 shooting game called Uridium. All right, and so all they did was change the opening title, they changed the music, and they modified the sprite that you see in the game to look a little bit more like the ship from the movie. Otherwise, it is beat for beat, note for note, the exact same game as the Commodore 64 one. So it's weird that they took them so long to finally get there.
And that when they finally got there, it was such just like a cash grab.
It was a cash grab, and it feels like a license that had already kind of run its course. You know, the movie was successful enough, but it wasn't like this massive blockbuster.
So this does bring up a genre of video game that I love and that I have played a lot of, especially in the arcade.
Galaga? Is that a genre? Is Galaga a genre?
Let her talk. She's
I'm
gonna
sorry.
punch you in the throat.
You're lucky I had food, because otherwise I'd punch you in the throat.
She did describe herself when she came in earlier as I'm going to eat because I am throat-punchingly hungry. So you lucked out. You're nonsense.
What did you eat to satiate that?
Emergency
Desire.
Chipotle, because that's the only time you should eat Chipotle, when it's an emergency.
It's urgent.
Otherwise,
It's
you
urgent.
go to Cabo Bob's.
But anyway, I'm talking about space shooty games.
Yeah.
I have spent so many quarters playing so many versions of Star Wars, of other forms of games that there is something about space shooting games that is like catnip for my brain.
Yeah. I think a really good one can be incredible. There's things like R-Type and Gradius and, a really good shooter game just scratches such an incredible itch. Ailish and I have been playing Cuphead for the longest time.
Oh my
which
God.
really, it's not space, but it kind of occupies that same
I
sort
can't
of
deal with Cuphead.
area.
It's too fucking hard.
It's so hard.
It's so hard.
We've been playing it for months now, and we're on the third island, and we're almost done. But it takes a lot of perseverance, for sure. But,
the animation is so beautiful.
No, you never get
I
tired.
should watch a playthrough. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
There's no glory in that, though. There's no glory. you know?
I'm not.
don't
I
always
know
need glory.
myself enough. If Cuphead was just all of a sudden a bunch of aliens and me shooting it,
Yeah.
I'd play it. Because it's me jumping on things. Fuck that.
Oh, that's right. The jumping, I guess, with 3. Yeah, because you genuinely took to this game and were kicking ass. Like I, on the other hand, could not really wrap my head around this one. I'm not even generally terrible at games like this. If it's a Gradius or a bullet hell type thing where it requires like intricate dodging, this one I really had a hard time wrapping my head around, and it's because it has a really propulsive sense of momentum, and it's also not very clear what you can interact with and what you can't. So I kept crashing into things that I didn't realize were obstacles, because I couldn't tell if they were below me or if they were in my way. Because you're sort of flying at an altitude. You've got a shadow that you're casting over a spaceship. You're just supposed to fly from one end to the other, take out all
Yeah.
the enemy ships, and then land your ship.
Took us forever to
It took
learn-
us forever
figure that part
to
out.
figure out how to land. I got through the first level pretty easily. I just couldn't figure out how to land, and
Yeah.
it was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And once I found out, I was like, I feel like I could beat this game in like 20 minutes now that I know how to play it.
What was the secret?
You had to go in the direction that the arrows are going.
Okay.
You had to slow down and then push A.
You had to slow down and push A. Okay.
Which
all right.
is only partially described in the instruction manual and is obviously not described at all in the game because it came out on the NES.
Yeah.
And we didn't have instructions in games at that point.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very simplistic kind of early arcade sort of game. There are 15 levels here total, and it's one of those games that just sort of ends without really ending. It's just like, oh yeah, you've done enough. Start over.
And the levels are nearly identical, just different colors and maybe slightly different layouts. And it basically plays out as like a side-scrolling, like Galaga, something in that genre of like. You're just shooting ships as they come at you, and then once you've done enough, you land, blow up the command ship. There's like this little button pressy mini game where it's like you're timing your presses.
The bonuses will go left or right, and you'll either get a bonus or you'll quit.
Yeah, you get like a pyramid of options, and on the right side of the pyramid and the left side of the pyramid is either going to be a score or a quit, and they're going to alternate, and you have to hit the one that is the score, and then you keep doing that until you get a quit or you hit the top of the pyramid, and I think you get a life or something at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, a very simple game. Once we learned how to land the ship, I think it would have been a little more enjoyable. But
I mean, I think outside of maybe like the original Gremlins game that we played, this is one of the most simplistic games that we've covered so far. It really is just like move left and right and shoot. I don't know if I would put this like with some of the better games of this genre, but
I didn't hate it.
No, it's harmless enough, but it is just kind of. It's almost too simple. It's simple to a fault, because the NES was capable of a little bit more than this.
I was kind of surprised that they had the ability to go multiple speeds. My feet are being attacked by a cat now, if I make any loud noises, that's what's happening.
Oh, yeah, fair.
So that you could go faster, you could slow down a little bit by tapping the other direction.
Yeah.
And once you got slow enough, it would actually flip you around, which is pretty neat.
Cute little animation on that, yeah.
Apparently interesting things, I say interesting, but somewhat interesting things that you could do using the A button while flying and not trying to land.
Oh.
That were just like some small maneuvers and stuff.
Oh. I couldn't tell.
But it was never relevant, and by the time I learned that was a thing, I don't think I played it again. Which was not something that I was rushing to do.
But, I do have to say, like, I was playing the level and dying, and then J-Ben's like, let me try it, and zip immediately through, gets to the end. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this whole thing right now.
Yeah.
So it was impressive.
I feel like...
I like space.
You like
like
space?
a life or two. I feel like once you get it down, you could probably do, again, multiple levels per life.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you have 5 lives. There's 15 levels. You have to do 3 per. But it was just frustrating because we're like, what do we do next? It's telling us to land. How do we land? We're just going to keep fighting ships here over and over again until we hit something, either a ship or something else. Because, those ships would come up on you quick.
They really sneak up. I do want to point out the irony, too, of a game called The Last Starfighter. This is a 2-player game.
It is.
If you want it to be. I think it's alternating like original Mario, but still, it is technically a 2-player game. But there is a more interesting game attached to this that I wanted to shout out. So in 2007, there's a little indie game company called Rogue Synapse, and they set out to recreate the arcade game as you see it in the movie. Now, again, we should emphasize this was never a real game. This was only animation that they developed for the film, but it was never actually a playable demo. But it is now. It's a totally freeware game. Anybody can download it. I believe they also built an actual arcade cabinet, like a dual joystick cabinet that you could probably spend an inordinate amount of money on. But so we downloaded this and checked it out. It's got the original graphics from the movie. It's got the voiceover from Robert Preston, like saying to join the Kodan or to take on the Kodan Armada, all of that. And then when you get into the game, it's pretty cool. Like
It's pretty fun.
It takes some wrapping your head around, and it's hard to play.
Well, and I don't think there are enough villains. Like the villains are very like flyby, but there's only like 2 of them at a time.
Yeah. It's a dual joystick layout, just like you have in the movie. But if you don't have the arcade setup or to have multiple joysticks, you just have to use the keyboard, like I was doing, and that takes a little getting used to because you're doing WASD to move your targeting reticle around, and then IJLS or whatever, JLD something. I forget what the keys are, but you're using your other hand to steer.
Yeah.
It's got kind of the wing commander sort of like round radar to sort of generally show you where they are, and there is actually a very helpful little 3D orb that it shows you where the enemies are, and you can sort of aim it like a barrel towards where your enemies are. And it's a system I wish we saw in more of these types of games, especially from this era, because that makes things pretty clear and simple.
Yeah, I absolutely think that it's in terms of controls, interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, on a computer, it doesn't play very well, but with 2 joysticks, I think it would be a much more fun experience.
I think so. Yeah.
I think what makes it doable is that you're not moving. You're just rotating in one point in space, while everything else moves around you.
Yeah.
Which is a combination of things that you didn't see before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting.
It's really well done, and I appreciate the accuracy and the level of detail that they put into this.
Yeah.
Because we are given very little information about how this game plays based on what we see in the film. You know, we get the sense that it is like a 3D-ish space shooter, and you need to take out enemies and all that. But
and
we don't really get a
boss
good look at the
level with
mechanics.
command ship.
So they had to extrapolate some stuff, but it looks great, and it's pretty cool, and it's a cool idea, and it's just one of those things. It's like, I'm glad somebody had the idea and the forethought to go through with this, and then it's available. Anybody can download it.
I got to the first command ship and died, but I think it was interesting and fun. I think if you had 2 joysticks, or you could adapt the control scheme to 2 control sticks on an Xbox.
Yeah.
Which Xbox controller, which wouldn't be impossible by far. You would have to use a third-party utility to do the mapping.
I'm sure.
But the fact that somebody recreated all of this and it genuinely looks like the game from the movie. I wouldn't have guessed if I had sat down and started playing this and Steve hadn't told me that I would have assumed it was the game.
Yeah, you thought it was just like a port of the actual game. Yeah. So I think it's cool that they went to that trouble. So I would say, track this down if you can find it. Yeah, it's just
shout out to them. Their website is great in the sense that it says copyright 2004 Rogue Synapse in the bottom right hand corner.
Yeah.
And at the bottom there's a link to the developer's MySpace.
Oh, I love that. All right, so it's maybe a little out of date, but hey, it's still there. It's still there, and it still
love
works.
This. And apparently that's kind of what this person did, was they just made games that existed in movies and didn't exist in real life.
Well, I love that idea, and I appreciate that they went to that trouble. Let's
and as well as emulating some existing games that are remaking some existing games that are difficult to find a way to emulate.
That's cool.
From cabinets.
Well, let's wrap up this episode here. Let's talk about our ratings. Is The Last Starfighter a good movie, good game, bad movie, bad game, or somewhere in between? Let's send it off to the Queen of Space, J-Ban.
I'm going to say childhood classic that you can do laundry to.
Great, yeah.
So it's a great, the first 30 minutes are fun. Then when you have to go and you have to get some laundry, and then you sit back down and you finish folding the laundry in front of the TV.
So you're saying that I started folding the laundry at the beginning of the movie and I should have waited half an hour?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah, the beginning's the best part. Yeah.
Beginning the best part. Yeah, it's very charming. And I always thought it was really funny, the ending, how they have this giant plinth that he's on instead of having him be in a stadium.
Yeah.
They just put him on this giant plinth. It's you can't see him.
No.
But in the game, I thought the game was fun. I thought it was fun. Yeah.
Justin, where do you come down?
This was definitely a movie.
No, I'm banning this was a movie.
You've got
I'm
it.
banning
You
this was
got
a
to
movie.
describe it more than that.
This is a movie that I probably won't remember.
Okay.
I think, especially for like modern standards. When I say modern standards, I mean modern standards of like sci-fi storytelling and stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty forgettable. I mean, at the time, it was probably, and I wasn't alive back then, but it was probably something that was more interesting and unique.
Yeah.
But in 2024, I've seen things that are similar to it before.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think any of them were super great.
Fair.
Rewatch or watch Future Man.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, so I'll have to give that a little. And that was
Get through the first episode.
5
The first
years ago.
episode is a little icky.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some raunchy humor in it, but yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't think it was a bad movie. To me, I didn't enjoy it a ton. But
Okay.
if it's not a movie I would run away from if somebody threw it up on the TV, but I
Fair.
would never throw it up on the TV.
Fair enough.
And the game was right. Cool. I think it could have been a little more interesting, but it wasn't a bad game.
No. I think I'm coming down in a pretty similar place. I liked this movie. I do wish I loved this movie. I wish this was more of a flick for me. It just doesn't totally come together in a way that
figured it out.
Satisfies its potential. What?
There's no Jar Jar Binks.
That's
There's
what we
no
needed.
Binks-esque character.
That's what we need. We need a Binks. We need that Binks energy. Yeah.
Big Binks energy.
I thought the NES game is pretty unremarkable, but I thought the fan-made game was very
Yes.
cool, and I appreciate that they did that.
Yeah, absolutely. The fan-made game was super chill. Props to them for doing it.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah.
I think I enjoyed that more than the actual game.
Fair
I don't know.
enough.
I was really good at the actual game. So
You were, yeah. So you're skewed in that sense. So like, yeah, you were quite good at that. Well, thank you everybody for listening and going on this spacely adventure with us. Be sure to tune in next week. We've got a fun one next week. We are talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And okay, people are going to complain and say, that game isn't based on that movie. It's our show. We want to play that movie and watch the game. That's right. I said it in the right order. We want to do those things. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely come back for Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I can't wait to get into it. Until then, everybody, Interstellar.
Centauri.
Boom.
Classic line, boom.